So, Tank, what is it, and how does an experience like this really change the game in education? The whole point we need to go on and really morph into believing here is that project-based learning, PBL, changes the game, right? It helps blend real-life applicability with classroom endeavors. So it's really about changing the way students think and how they create. That's really what the motivation behind Tank is. WTD, so what the dizzle here. So to give you background story on my classroom, we are 100% digital and we are PBL Blended Learning environment based. By 100% digital, that means that we are no paper. Everything is done using Chromebooks. That everything you see, we create online in some fashion or through some programs. My real push for this is we want to start, if we're starting here, right, we want to get away from this model of education. The rote memorization, the boredom, the same thing, the mundane routine over and over. We want to get into solving things, building puzzles, and we use that through technology. We use a whole bunch of applications, and then we come down here, we get creative, and that produces the environment that we're in there. So for me, it really is the belief that the learning process does have to have this creative objective attached to it in a way that can complement our state standards. So oftentimes it feels like we're sacrificing creativity for state standards and vice versa. I think there's a way that you can blend both, and that way is through project-based learning overall. You have the link for this, so again, if you'd like to see what the experience is like, you're more than welcome to watch these very short YouTube videos. Please do. But moving on with Tank here, so this is where this is some of our adverts, and again, everything you see here is stuff that we create personally, all the way down to the logo. We had a student design the logo for us. Every company designs their own logos using Adobe Creative Photoshop. We use QR codes, we do posters, everything. So it's really, really a creative process for us. So you're asking now, how does PBL Blended Learning work for me in the classroom? And again, for everyone, it's going to be different, and that's okay, but that's how we learn from each other. What we do, though, is we do follow this design thinking process. And what you'll notice here is this is the wheel of the classroom that we have here. I have used visualization heavily because I do believe that students want to see things. They don't just always want to read the same thing. So you'll notice with sympathize, define, imagine, prototype, try it, determine, we have little emoji cons or little pictures that help us get our minds wrapped around what we're trying to do for that particular stage in the design thinking process. If you're a little unsure about what design thinking is, you're more than welcome to take a look at these 2 short YouTube videos about it. But it's basically just a process for creative problem solving. So we're creating things, we're solving issues, but we're using a process. It doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? Especially with students in the junior, senior year before they enter the real world or college, they really need to understand the processes behind those things. So that's why we've developed this creative thinking process around design thinking. So each particular day will be a color, and the whole point is it's cyclical, so we move on that way. And again, just because you're here doesn't mean you can't redo the wheel again. And that's really the point of it. So we start with really learning, so you're guided, practice a bit more, your input, and then we move, we state the problem, we form an idea, we create a full-scale model, look at it, then we actually test it. Right, we want to see, does it work, and then we have to package it and see, is it going to meet our objectives, or do we need to reshop and then go back around and do it? But the whole point is this is a process cycle for us. So you're asking, how then does Tank work, right? And my big belief in this one is it is an idea. Ideas never stop. So Tank for us is changing all the time because we have to stay current with things. But 3 key focus areas for Tank, and especially in any blended learning, project-based learning endeavor, you need to have some focus areas that you're going to make sure that you stick to. The first one for me is group cohesion. So without a cohesive group, the process fails, and it's extremely, extremely difficult to create anything. And by this, I mean you got to have the right chemistry in each group. We call them families in Don McLeod's classroom, but in terms of small groups, it has to be the right chemistry. How you go about that, totally up to you, but that is very important in that one. Accountability, so there has to be a process for when things are being done, there is something with it. So it's not just doing things to do things. It's doing things because they have a purpose, but then there's ways to check up and follow up on it to make sure that the individual students within the small groups are doing what they say they're doing, and they're doing it to the highest degree possible. So accountability is a big one, which is why we use visualization during this. Number 3, and I think a lot of people get confused on this, is it is a cycle. Design thinking is a cycle. Most people assume that once you start here and end here, it's done. So what you see is they tend to slow down in these areas here because they know this is the end quote. So therefore, they need to slow down so they can get some understanding here. Our belief in design thinking is it is a cycle. So even if you get here on one thing, you can always restart the cycle again, and it continues to go. So it continuously repeats itself. That's what we're really looking for in that one. If you want to get an overview tutorial of Tank and look at some of the stuff, you're more than welcome to in terms of a deep down fashion, please do. But if you look here at your next one, you have access to all these documents here. And what I've done is I've given you examples of certain SOPs or procedures that we do in Tank to help make this a real life endeavor. So for example, if I were to show you a schedule on schedule 3, this is what an example would look like, where we have our date, we have a color focus, and we have tasks, we have forms, and we can hyperlink things and whatnot. The whole point is the students know where we're going, right? It's real life. You know what you're doing when it comes to your job and everything. An example job list task for accountability. So this is an example of what a company made. What they would do is they each have individual roles within it, and they could put their tasks that they do. And so what you would see is as this thing is being built, each day or each week things will be added to it. And they switch it to green if it's done, orange if it's, hey, we're getting there, and red is, hey, it's really overdue, we got to push on this one. But again, this really highlights the accountability, and this is a living document within each small company's group, so they all have access to it, they're collaborating and working together. Eventually, we do make the small business plans, so we put it through our system here, and they will create a full small business plan. Pretty awesome when you see all the work get put into that. And to show you what some students have made, so here's a company example, OnSpot. So part of the solution, not the pollution, love it. What they want to do is they wanted to take normal passes and turn them into digital means. And how this was created was through a problem that they identified in terms of passes. So they created all this artwork, they created everything, and it's going to be an actual app that is kind of like an Aries-like system, but it's unique in the sense that it blends everything together. What I really want to highlight here is that this is where the creative element goes. Every single phone that you see here, this was created. It's known as pseudocoding. So it's basically coding before the actual writing of the code. You have to have a blueprint. You have to see what the visualization, what you want your app to look like. They did this down to every single button. They created this pseudocoding measure for their app. Pretty cool. I know you're asking me like, oh my God, how did they do that? How did they do that is because the design thinking process allowed them to do that, which is why I totally believe in the value of Tank. Going further in terms of tracking and accountability, so this is what students would be filling out. Obviously, it's a lot longer, but I just wanted to give you a quick snippet of it. Each day, a VP will rate students because I believe in not only metacognition for individual students, but I do believe in peer assessment because they have to learn how to assess each other and what to look for, because reality is the teacher is not always going to be there in life to assess. You're going to have to learn how to do that, and it is difficult, but it's also a very meaningful experience. So for example, this company, the VP is in charge of rating each day. And if you'll go up here and look at our scale, these are the scales they give them. They think it's a high achievement, average, low to minimal, or absent, and we have a rubric with that so they know which one it goes with. However, for each day, they would go through and they would score. VPs are not allowed to score themselves. That's for me, so we do that later. But what you'll notice here is when the algorithm is written, or the equation in this one for them, it changes their background in Google Sheets for them to a color combination, so that way they can see their progress. And really you're asking yourself, what do you see from this pattern, right? If you just take a second and look at it and put your mindset as a student, what could you decipher about your company in the 12 days that you've been recording, right? what we see is we start out pretty okay, and then through here we get decent, things get a lot better, and then for some reason we hit a rut, and then we start picking it back up, right? So what we're doing is we're also teaching the accountability, but we're teaching students how to read the data and how to interpret it, because it's one thing to collect and make data, it's another thing to say what that data means, and that's something we have to push students to do, data analysis. So by color coding this, it really helps students out in terms of seeing where they're going, and then, oh wow, we hit a big patch here. What then are we going to do to correct it to get back to these times and so forth? So that's a big push in that one. Why we do that too is because we do track things, because we want to help students learn. That's our main thing, and we want to do it in a meaningful way. So they do have a journal that they keep, or a daily student example, what they write. So each day they just write a little bit in terms of what they did, the task, and they keep it. This is just a very, very small excerpt here. But what I would point you to is what's really cool is, again, we track data and we let them be part of it as well, so they can see where they're going and make the changes necessary. What we do in our equations here is we have the leadership score and we have company role score. So by leadership score, I mean the CEO and VP would have a score together, and then the whole company together. So what we're doing is we're separating the leadership from the company roles, and reality is that's a real life thing. So what you would want to see in this is, if leadership is the pink, company roles is blue, you would want to see a very close score line, wouldn't you? If you think about it, right? You want your leadership and your company roles to be close in what they're doing, their output. You would want to avoid seeing something like this where you see a deep divide here or a big divide here. So this graphical representation, we would probably want to see it going up to the right throughout the course of it. You know, what we see here is we see a little bit and then we go down. So our trend line is starting to go down, so then we'd want to pick it back up there. How we look at this in terms of data here is this equation's written for all these companies, for example. We want it to be close to zero. When it's at zero, that means the companies, in terms of the roles, individual roles, and the leadership, have all ranked themselves relatively the same, and there's no difference between it. That means everyone is working at their optimal best, right? When we see the red, it's a negative there. It's really bad, because what that means for us in that one is that the CEOs and the leadership and the VPs are underperforming compared to the company roles, right? And we know from real life, companies don't exist like that. But what's also bad on the flip side is the yellow. And the yellow is the opposite, where the CEOs and the leadership think that they are doing a lot better job than their company roles. So what this data does is it helps students see where they need to pick up. So it's one thing to be an awesome leadership combined group, but it's not good if you're that much better than everyone else, because you're not really inspiring, you're not helping them work. On the flip side, it's not good when you have leadership that is underperforming. So through this experience, students are able to see this and they're able to judge this, and they have access to all this every day, so they can check it just based on what they put in their columns for the data. So to me, that's a really cool part of going back to accountability, is that in a PBL environment, you have to have accountability. So creating simple stuff like this is a big, big way to do it. And I know it seems like it's a lot of work. I promise you it's not. Through Google Sheets, just like Excel in Microsoft, it's very simple to use once you get it and tailor it to yourself. I do appreciate giving me the chance to help you see what Tank is about, especially in a PBL Blended Learning environment. So if you ever need anything, please feel free to get a hold of me. There's my contact information. We do have, if you have access to this file as well, in the YouTube link, so you can click on it, look at it. We have access to our webpage, mcleodclass.com. Don't forget that. But again, this is all about you. So take things from this, tailor what you want to do, your experience. I can't push that enough, that if you keep doing what other people are doing, you're going to get the same results all the time. So maybe take from what we're doing and push it and make it your own. I guarantee you the feedback you're going to get from students is out of this world, and they're going to love coming to your class just because this is so unique and it's going to help them for life after high school. Again, any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always here to help out and to listen and to learn as well. I want to see what other people do so I can make myself that much better, and we can all get better collectively. Take care.